So to solve both of these problems, the first thing I'll need to do is come into the Package Manager console and tell it to enable migrations for this project. This is an entity framework feature that knows how to look at an existing database, figure out what's inside of there, look at your model, figure out what the model needs to store, and then be able to generate change scripts that can be run against the database so the schema can be fixed up. And you can make those change scripts explicit, which we'll look at in a later model, or you can make them implicit and just say, give me automatic migrations. I just want you to fix up the database whenever something is wrong without doing some additional steps. The other thing that migrations will give you is a seed method. This seed method will execute every time you update the database, and it's an opportunity to populate the database with lookup data that it always needs when the application runs. It's also a chance to populate the data with a user. And there's a couple different strategies I could use to do that. One way I could do that is to use the traditional entity framework approach to seeding the database, which is to do something like context.users.add or update. This is what we usually use to seed the database. And I could say, given a user U, look at the username, and if that username exists, update the record. If the username doesn't exist, you're going to insert this record, and then I give it a list of users to work against. So I could create a new application user, which is from the models namespace, so I need to bring that in. And I could set the username to sallen, and I could set the password, actually the password hash to, how am I going to hash the password? Well, that is possible too. I could create a password hasher. This is a class that is in the Microsoft.ASP.NET.Identity assembly. It's something that you can use. It's a public class. And I could say, please hash the following password so I can store it in the database hash and everything will work. And this is one approach I could use. That would apply sallen appropriately. But these are the types of little details like hashing the password correctly that user manager already does for me. So let me show you an alternate approach to seeding the database. I can still use the context, but what I can use the context to do is I could use the context to say, does the user that I want in the database exist? In other words, are there any users where given a user u.username equals sallen? If not, then I want you to execute the following code. First, let's create a store. So essentially what we have to do is something very similar to the account controller. We need to build up a user manager so we can use the user manager to create this user. So I'm going to need a user store. And that user store needs a DB context, but that DB context is already provided to me in this seed method. So I need a new user store, not an iUser store, but a new user store, which is in the entity framework namespace. Give me a user store for application user, passing in that context. And now I can create the manager. So give me a new user manager for application user, passing in the store. And then what's the user I want to create? Well, I want an application user with a username of sallen. And now I want the manager to create that user with this password, which is presumably something that could be changed at first logon. And now that I have migrations in the project and I have a seed method, what I can do is go out to the Package Manager console, tell it to update the database, and it runs the seed method. And now I should be able to run the application again. And hopefully this time, instead of getting an error, I'll be able to come into the login page and log in with that username and password. And so this is how you can put some of these pieces together. The user store is an implementation of iUser store. It's specific to the entity framework, so it needs a DB context. The user manager is part of the core identity features. It knows how to orchestrate various components. You just need to give it things like a user store so it knows where to store things. And I'm using those all together here in the migrations to seed the database with an initial user. And this is also what the account controller is doing. It's putting together a user manager so it can create users, log in users, and manage user passwords.